debate seems pointless.
Jordan Peterson is very, very, very good at this, where he, Ben Shapiro has rightly identified this as,
oh, wasn't it awesome how you own destiny in that debate, and he was such an idiot, and blah, 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 and that kind of thing. And I worry as well that the audience is similar.
I have a big problem in debates to where I'm constantly tearing down, and I can show somebody why their argument is bad, but then when you walk away from it at the end, I'm just like a destructive force. And I asked you for your thing, because you said that, and your statement was incredibly positive. I felt...
You have a very intense personality, right?
Sure.
Like you speak very quickly, you have a somewhat sort of combative energy to you. Maybe you're just less interested in some of these things that interest me.
Suppose I wasn't ready for a full-on attack of my character. I think Ben Shapiro is probably one of the best or most intelligent right-wing, as much as I might disagree with him.
Like, could Candace Owens do that?
I don't think so. Absolutely not. I would love to see Candace Owens, Matt Walsh. I can fall into the same trap sometimes.
But no, it's like, as I've gotten older, I've realized that debate seems pointless. And actually, this is something that I was going to ask you about, right? Whereas you were sort of defending your debates, and that you, correct me if I'm wrong, you said that like one of the values is that it allows you to kind of like understand and humanize the other side. And I would just be curious to know if like, A, you feel that you've been humanized through these encounters, and if you feel that your opponents have been humanized in your own mind.
I think that when you do anything, I think you have to acknowledge the realities of things that will happen as a byproduct of either physics or human nature. So when I talk about like capitalism, or if I talk about policies that we would get to help people, anytime you talk about putting like price caps or price floors or government intervention, you have to be aware that these are going to impact the markets somehow. You can't pretend they don't exist. You can't turn a blind eye to it. There's markets are real and they are powerful, and whenever you intervene in them, something is going to happen as a byproduct of that. When I think of somebody saying like, have I been humanized, or do I humanize people? I don't know if that's a conscious or cognitive process where it's like, oh, like I do consciously try to be somewhat empathetic. It depends on the debate, it depends on who I'm talking to, it depends on what I'm trying to represent in a particular thing. I do try to be empathetic and humanize the people that I talk to some extent. And I don't know if I get that same feel back from a lot of people that I talk to, but I think that the humanization is a byproduct of just having the conversations, especially because I'm pretty good at what I do, that when I do go on these shows, whatever they see of me and however that person treats me, it's going to be way better than the 30-second clip they saw of me prior to that. So even if the other person is a huge asshole, even if the other person is like screaming at me or shouting at me being able to fully represent what I believe and what I think in that longer form thing is going to be infinitely better than the TikTok clips or the Twitter clips that gripers or far left people or whatever are shooting out for me otherwise. So I do think it has helped. It's hard, because I go to sleep every night playing this a million times on my fucking AirPods. It's that it's the quote from Mr. Rogers. That like anytime there's a disaster and everything seems look for the helpers. Yes. That anytime you do a big debate, it's the huge shit shows on both sides. But what I'm really like trying to hone in on is like, am I getting a few emails from people saying like, hey, I used to think you were a huge cock loser, and I think you're still kind of that, but you're like a little cooler, or I appreciate you representing this. Those are the people that I try to look for. And I feel like the more I talk to other people, kind of like the more chance of that happening is. Yeah.
I guess I could see it. Do you think here's a question. Do you think it's important that I'm sort of asking you a question on your show? But
you're fine. Ask whatever.
Do you think it's important that presidential candidates debate?
When you say the word important, what do you mean by that?
Well, do you think it serves the same function as what you're describing in your debates?
Absolutely not. Political debates are like, you ask me a question about a thing, like, what do you think about homelessness? And then I'm talking at the audience about the things that I believe, that I know that they want to hear, that I think will galvanize the most supporters. And that's it. We're not actually really, there is no actual conversation between like two political people, but that's like the game of politics, unfortunately, kind of.
Why? And that doesn't happen so like, I guess that's true. Like when you're debating one of these characters, you feel like you're actually both mutually invested in each other, and like having a debate on the intellectual merits of the arguments that are being made. It's not playing to the crowd in the same way.
Was that to me? No, absolutely. I wish that was the case.
What?
I wish that was the case.
But isn't that what you just said?
Well, no. I said that I get humanized as a result of having the conversation. But two people engaging, that what you just described happens 1 out of 10,000 debates, where both sides are intellectually curious and they're truly trying to see and understand the other person so that you can have a really good back and forth.
Not necessarily curious, but just in the sense that they're at the very least engaged. Because when you're contrasting that to a political debate, you're saying that they're not even really engaged in their opponent.
Yeah, they're more engaged than they would be either doing a TikTok clip or just like having a political debate where they're both talking to the audience. Yeah, they're more engaged. Yeah.
Are you thinking about your audience or their audience when you're in the heat of a debate?
It super depends on where I'm going and what the topic is. I don't think I could ever generalize that. So for instance, for Jordan Peterson, I'm not going to convince him or his audience that like institutions are really good and we should trust all of them, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, I'm not going to convince them. My goal would be to just like, let's just like ask a few questions just to get like a reality check on what exactly you're talking about and to get you to at least like own a few hard positions rather than just kind of like talking around them for a little bit. Jordan Peterson is very, very, very good at this, where he, Ben Shapiro has rightly identified this as jacking off, just asking questions.
Oh, yes.
Although Ben Shapiro said does this so much. But yeah, we would say like, oh, well, why are there 20% excess deaths in Europe right after the vaccines came out? And there's no other explanation for it. And then you'll ask him, like, do you think vaccines killed like all these people? And like, well, I didn't say that.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, just like asking questions like, well, don't you think that if this was a thing that was happening, don't you think that like these people would say something, or these people would ask questions? Or like, if we think that it's like capitalist evil enterprises that made the mRNA vaccines, why didn't Johnson & Johnson, who couldn't make one, why didn't they call out these other companies to destroy them? Like, wouldn't that make sense? The goal is to just like, because I'm never moving a person, right? And I'm sure you've had this experience. Sometimes you talk to people very far over here, very far over here. You're never bringing them all the way over. You're just like asking a few questions to like make them flesh out their position a bit more in the hopes that in doing that, it'll move them a little bit. Yeah.
I just always like, the thing is that I always worry about is that, and I think this goes back to what we were saying before about like the degree that people live in bubbles and, you know, very polarized and all that. I sometimes worry that like, you know, you can have a conversation with a person, you can make some degree of progress, you can make them maybe a little bit self-conscious about the weakness of their arguments and stuff in that moment. But then what I worry about is that like the second the debate ends and they go back into their bubble, they just regress. And they go completely, they learn nothing. Like their minds just revert to how it was beforehand. And then suddenly they go, oh, wasn't it awesome how you owned destiny in that debate? And he was such an idiot and blah, 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 and that kind of thing. And I worry as well that the audience is similar, right? Like the audience might be listening to the debate and they're thinking like, oh, maybe this guy has a few points and so on and so forth. But then when they immediately, then they turn to the comments and the comments are like, oh, owned and sucked and what an idiot. And I can't blah, 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 blah. So I don't know, like, again, the space in which people are even allowed to reach these kind of moderate conclusions seems so preciously small. And also there's no like supra pundit class that exists to analyze these debates in a fair and objective way and say like, well, some had some good points and some had some good points, right? The reception of your debates, I assume, would always be sort of filtered through the various other partisan media filters that exist.
I had a huge Israel-Palestine one with some people, and listening to people comment about that one and comment about the performance. I've seen so many shows now where people talk about how I got trashed, or trashed, but not a single one, because I'll sit there and watch on stream. Let's see if they bring up a single actual substantive point from the conversation, and not even one ever. And I'm like, well, what was the point of this? Somebody watched a 20-minute review on the debate, and they're probably never going to watch the debate, and nothing from that debate was even brought up. And then people are going to carry forward this like simulacrum of the debate where it's like, oh yeah, that conversation where Destiny got destroyed. And it's like, which conversation? Well, the one that Brianna Joy Gray mentioned. What, like, why, how did they get destroyed? Well, she said it, and I think it happened. And like, it is frustrating. I do agree with you that people will go back immediately after, but there's that saying that success is just, it's like luck meets, or opportunity meets preparation. I think that when you're giving people these like critical questions to kind of make them question, you know, what's going on their side, you're just kind of like slowly massaging and creating space so that in the future, if something happens, if you have heard these things, maybe you're like slightly more warmly able to go in that direction. But it's not, this is all like a very gradual over time. And I didn't even know if any of this was actually worthwhile 8 years ago when I started, because I agree with you. You finish a debate, you look at the comment section, it's like, why the fuck am I even wasting my time? And it's been very much like a process that over almost a decade, I can see like the fruits that are coming off the tree now. And I'm like, okay, I think this is working. It's just really, really, really hard to track.
You're playing the long game.
Basically, yeah. But not like in a, people say that a lot, and then I'll see there'll be posts on like 4chan or Twitter or whatever saying like, oh, Desi's trying to like lie to people or trap people, and this is his strategy or whatever. There's like a strategy, but like just as much as there's a strategy of any political guy that talks on YouTube to everybody. Like, I'm not lying, I'm not disingenuous about any of it. I'm just not gonna, because people will be like, oh, well, why aren't you showing your full position? And it's like, well, it's not like my position is hidden. I'm just not gonna argue every single possible point that I have if I show up to argue with somebody about something, right? Like if somebody comes at me and they say like, oh, well, my position is that slavery was actually justified because it gave black people more opportunities in the US. I'm not going to sit here and argue for why I think DEI or affirmative action might be justifiable. I'm going to argue on like a very philosophical of like, well, hold on.
Yeah.
Even if they did gain, is that like actually a good precedent? Like, would we really want to say that you could do something horrible to somebody if their children benefit in the future? Isn't this like the argument that left-leaning people use for climate change and all that you hate so much? So yeah, it's definitely you take people where they are. I asked you earlier if you ever were like the debater archetype. I'm the debater archetype, and I'm very destructive instead of constructive in my conversations. And I've had I've been trying to figure out recently how do I want to like orient myself through this world, because I have a big problem in debates to where I'm constantly tearing down, and I can show somebody why their argument is bad, but then when you walk away from it at the end, I'm just like a destructive force. And I asked you for your thing because you said that, and your statement was incredibly positive. I felt patriotic because you want to talk about like political fluency. You want to talk about like positive aspects. Yes. How do you, in a world of online politics where everything is relentlessly negative, is this like a mindset where you're like, I want to tear down Trudeau for trying to do gun legislation because of something that happened in fucking Texas, but today I'm going to talk about something positive. What does that process look like for you?
I don't know. I mean, it's quite interesting talking with you, Stephen. This is probably the longest I've consumed you in any form.
Okay.
And you have a very intense personality, right?
Sure.
Like you speak very quickly, you have a somewhat sort of combative energy to you. And that sort of gives me a sense of just the kind of person that you are and like the kind of things that you're interested in. Like you strike me, you're very bright, obviously very intellectual, very nimble. And I could see why you would then be drawn to sort of like intellectual combat and intellectual argument and that kind of thing, because that just seems like how your brain is designed, right? And I don't know, like maybe you're just less interested in some of these things that interest me, right? Like I'm like an artist, like I've always been into drawing and fine art and this kind of stuff. Like I like aesthetics, I like things. Like if you see my videos, I have like a huge collection of all sorts of knickknacks and gewgaws. The folks at home can't see this, but this studio, for instance, is pretty bare. I don't know if like your home is this way as well, like that you're just kind of...
I went to college for music. I like music. I play piano.
So, but again, like even that's kind of like a more sort of like cerebral kind of thing, right? Like
I'm sorry. Art is not cerebral, but music is cerebral?
No, because music, you appreciate music, right? Like you don't collect music, right? Like you don't have like a bunch of little music, maybe you do, little musical gewgaws and stuff like that. Like music is less, I think in some ways, a less sort of consumerist hobby. And I would say that I'm pretty consumerist in some ways. Like I like when I I love going to the supermarket, right? Like I love when I'm here in the States, I love to like...
I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that in my life.
No, it's like I go to the States, I was at the what's it called? The CVS, yesterday. And it's fun to me to like walk the aisles and see like all these kind of like cool American candies and snacks. And like, I bought this big package of chapstick, which had like 5 different flavors of chapstick in the end, and I was thinking like, oh, mango chapstick, that's so cool. Mangoes, where does that come? How did mango wind up like an iconic American thing? Like my mind just kind of like makes these connections, right? Like I want to tell this story, and I find this stuff like exciting to me. Like I'm stimulated by this. I'm stimulated by like the prosperity and the wealth and the decadence, you could even say, like just the sheer amount of stuff we have in this culture. Like we are the inheritors of a tremendous long progress, like a long sort of evolution of progress on this continent, where we have now become so wealthy and we enjoy so many things. We have so many creature comforts. Like we live fantastic lives. And that's something that I've always enjoyed. And like, that's where I suppose like a certain conservatism in my personality comes from, is that I just look around the world and I look around our culture and I see so many things to value and so many things to be happy about. And I've always been that way. Like my parents really sort of drilled into me, I think from a young age, that like I should be grateful. Like don't be spoiled. That was always the worst thing that you could be in my household, which was to be spoiled or to be entitled or to not be grateful for the tremendous things that we have. And so I think that some of the content that I make is sort of animated by that. And I think that some of the sort of the kind of the small c conservative instincts that I have are animated by that as well. When people are tearing down America, when people are tearing down American institutions or American culture, or saying that there's nothing good about this culture, there's nothing good about this country, like that gets my back up, because that starts to strike me as like, what the hell are you talking about? Like this stuff is great here. Like you're so lucky to live here. Why don't you be grateful? Why don't you learn to appreciate the things that you have instead of only focusing on the bad things and only trying to like tear things down and getting sort of stuck in this cycle of rhetorical excess where, you just say, oh, this is like a failed state capitalist hellhole, I don't know. But
Jeez, okay.
Maybe
I was asking what your mental process was. I wasn't ready for a full-on attack of my character, but I understand.
No, I'm just sort of saying.
No, I understand. You think it this like naturally emanates kind of from your disposition, basically, just comes through in your content.
Yeah, and it's just like the kind of things that I've always been interested in, the kind of things that interest me. Like maybe you're just not interested in the same things, and like maybe that means that it would be kind of a little bit more of a struggle for you to care about the sort of things that I care about and to talk.
I'm interested in things.
Are you interested in things?
I actually am. I super am, because like my community likes it, for instance, because like I said, I have a semi-formal background for music, and every now and then I'll be like, oh, like why do I not like the new Final Fantasy VII remake soundtrack as opposed to the last one? I can talk about this for hours. It's very interesting to me.
Okay.
And I can be positive, but when it comes into the political stuff, I'm very negative. Yeah. I think it's just I don't know any U.S. history.
Maybe you should. Why don't you know more U.S. history?
I just didn't care about it in school, I guess.
What were you doing in school?
Sleeping in class and then playing video games afterwards.
You were not a good student? So like,
well, I did okay.
Yeah. See, like, I mean, maybe like this is a key variable as well. Like when I was in high school, I liked high school. I had good teachers that took an interest in me. I loved to learn. I liked to study. I mean, I did a lot of that was when I first got into like reading and stuff and self-directed learning. I love to learn about U.S. history, world history, politics, the political institutions, and all this kind of stuff, right?
I will say that after I got, not to go on a tangent or whatever, but I finally got a formal ADHD diagnosis 6 months ago, and I've been on medication. And in the last 6 months, I've read more than I've read in the past 35 years of my life. It's not even close. And going through the whole history of Israel-Palestine, and now like reading Supreme Court docs and everything, I will say that being able to sit and read everything gives me a way bigger appreciation for how stuff works. That when people say like, this is such a stupid thing, like, why does this offense exist? Why is this a statutory offense? Or why is this strict liability? Or why is Supreme Court? There's actually really good reasons why all of this happens. So maybe having an understanding of the things definitely gives you more of a care about what happens and an appreciation. Yeah. I do agree with that. I feel like, I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like history and government and everything are such throwaway topics.
Throwaway in what sense? In
school, and that like, I had a teacher that was on my stream like 2 weeks ago, and he was asking me, because he does social studies and history for high schoolers, and he was asking me like, what do you think can be done to make these more interesting? Because you told me that you hated these subjects in school, and it's hard for me to know like, well, I don't know if this would have genuinely made me interested, but I do remember feeling that anytime a topic was like, if the teacher had a big interest in it, and the teacher was like, this thing here is why today we do this, that always made me care way more. I don't know if it's this way in art school. Did you go to art school?
No.
Oh. In music school, music is oftentimes treated in like this museum type way. Yeah. Even in jazz, they'll say like, well, these were the greats. You learn these solos, you transcribe them, you play them, blah, blah, and this is like what this is. But they don't give you much of like a modern day interpretation of things. And it crystallizes, it like freeze frames all this stuff in a way that's disconnected and not at all relatable, and it feels hard to care. And I feel like if I had a teacher maybe earlier on for history that made me understand that like this seems irrelevant, but it's actually so important today, maybe I would have cared more about it growing up.
Yeah, I mean, I've been very influenced by an American thinker called E.D. Hirsch, who is a big proponent of a theory of education that's called cultural literacy, which is basically the idea that's very unfashionable now, which is that there are basically like just big concepts, big ideas, big names, dates, things that young people basically have to learn. Like you kind of have to go through the list of a certain set of sort of canonical knowledge, and that gives you a sort of degree of fluency that then allows you to sort of like build on that knowledge and learn deeper and deeper and more complex topics in sort of the way that you're describing. The problem, and I do think that like this is something that the right wingers do have a point on, which is that some of the way that young people are taught these days has kind of gotten too kind of high concept, maybe even dare I say a little too postmodern, where it's all about like, just these kind of like very abstract theories of knowledge, abstract theories of learning, these kind of like larger kind of narratives about injustice and inequality and power relationships and this kind of stuff. And like trying to teach young people all of that stuff instead of just like, here's some names, here's some like inventions, here's some famous guys, here's some famous battles and wars and names of countries and monuments and things like that you just have to learn, right? And so again, like that's something that I'm trying to do a little bit, in part because I've realized that there are a lot of people, people younger than you, who feel that either because they didn't pay attention in school or they didn't have good teachers or whatever, they feel like a sense of insecurity. Like they are very aware that there's big gaps in their knowledge. And again, I think that's why, some people are not like you who learn to better themselves and fill the gaps of their knowledge the correct way. Some of them, they just try to fill it in with conspiracy theories and attitudes that sort of dismiss the relevance of things that they don't know.
Yeah.
I think that that's what, frankly, how some people on sort of the far left dismiss the relevance of things they don't know. It's like, well, why should I learn, these presidents? They were all just, racist white slave owners or whatever. There's nothing important about that. Like,
yeah. And even in terms of like me being able to fill in the gaps of my knowledge, like even over the past 6 months, I've gone from like if there's a don't get triggered, but if there's a passage on Wikipedia, I'll be like, okay, well, let me read the full passage in the book. And then I think by February, March, I was like, okay, it's not enough to read the passage. I need to read like the whole page, right? Because I need to make sure I understand what's over there. And then like a month or two later, it's like, okay, we got to read like the page before and after. And now when I'm reading stuff, I'm like, I think I need to read the book because like, especially after finally having to start to read, I could be like, man, there are so many ways that I could pull a couple pages out of this book to completely misrepresent everything inside of it. And now I do, like at the minimum, I would say like I have to read the chapter and understand. I need to know who the author is and what the book is about if I want to understand this one sentence, because it's not enough to read the paragraph. It's not enough to read the page before and after. I need I need the chapter at minimum, and then what's the book about to understand the context of what's being said. And something that actually just clicked in my mind, as funny as you mentioned that, I used to say all the time that I took a lot of math and physics in high school, that I like math and physics because at least like it builds off of itself, right? So if you know one thing, you can learn the next thing. And that's why I like those subjects. And now I'm just figuring this out, that history is the exact same way. Especially going through Israel-Palestine, where it's like, oh, I know why they did this now. Like, this isn't even a mystery. Like something that I'd be like, oh my God, like how did they win this war? Or why did this leader think this thing? It's like, well, you could almost write the next few pages if you studied everything that come before it. And then even in US history, when things start popping up, just having an understanding of the structure of things can inform so much more of your modern political understanding. Yesterday, I was a little critical of Stephen King made a tweet saying that abortion is now back in Arizona, and the same law that allows for abortion allows for the age of consent to be 10 years old. And because I have a little bit of an understanding of how law works, it's like my guess is this was probably like a huge fucking bill or a huge thing, and this part has probably been updated. The abortion part probably wasn't because the Supreme Court ruled over it. And then we looked it up and that's what it was. But then I went under the Twitter and a whole bunch of people were thinking like, oh, now you can have sex with 10-year-olds in Arizona because of the illiteracy of the tweeter and the illiteracy of the audience. So
no, it's and when you gain this kind of literacy, it's useful. It just makes you, I think you can go through life, you can just appreciate things more, you can have more deep conversations with a greater variety of people. Like I here in Miami, very diverse place, you meet people. I've had some conversations. I ask them where they're from and they tell me, oh, I'm from this country or that country. I know enough about that country that I can say, oh, how are things going over there? And I've heard about this and that kind of thing. Or do you like this food? I know that this is a popular food with your people and that kind of thing. When
an American or a Canadian imagine can do that, people are very impressed.
Well, they are, because again, like, people's fluency is just very limited, right? I was, here's another example. Like I was walking on my walk here, like I passed a place called, I think it was a hotel or maybe it was an apartment building. It was called the Lord Balfour, right? Okay. And so you think like, why would a place in Miami be called the Lord Balfour? And, because you're fluent on this topic now, but it's just little things like that. Like you can just enjoy things because you can make the connections and you can suddenly realize that we're living in this very complex, rich world in which we've inherited a great deal of culture from all sorts of different places. And
it's not just a bunch of discrete things like history feels. It's all connected.
Yeah. You can, and again, like you can find it everywhere. Like it's not just for political debates. Like just walking down the street, you can find all sorts of cool things. So you can and I just think isn't it nice that if we can live lives where we can enjoy even the small things, if we can even go to the supermarket and we can be delighted by, chapstick or whatever, right? Like I think that's in my own small way, I think that's the life that I want to live, a life where I'm just happy and satisfied and can find pleasure to compensate for all of, like, there's enough legitimate hardships that we all go through in our individual lives, right? Everybody's life is full of heartbreak and suffering and all the rest of it. So like, why not try to have some aspects of your life that can just be sources of simple pleasures?
So when you cover something and it's a politically charged issue and you get a lot of people that show up and disagree with you, do you never have the inclination or the urge to like fight back? I'm going to do a video showing why this is so dumb. Or do you just rolls off your back? You don't care? Or what is the feeling, I guess? My instinct is to, like, it's funny, like I talk to people and they say, you should debate more. You should make more kind of like harder edged videos, more combative videos. I don't feel like that's really what the world needs. Like I mean, with all due respect, because I think you made a very eloquent defense for the kind of content that you make and why you do what you do. But I just feel like there's just so much of that right now. And I feel like I want to solve perhaps a different problem or tackle what I perceive to be the problems of our society in a slightly different way. And it's like, yeah, there are issues that I feel very passionate about. And there are things that like I feel like I can argue
maybe in the same confident way that you argue things that you feel. But I don't know, like because I guess maybe I was sort of turned off by it a little bit when I was doing the talking head thing on television, when I would be arguing and debating with people. And I really did kind of get the sense that this was something that existed for my benefit, not the benefit of the audience. Or to the extent it existed for the benefit of the audience, it was that same sort of like shallow thing where it's like I represent a certain, I'm a cipher of a certain team and people want me to win.
I'm owning this guy so that you can watch it and you can go own other people.
Yeah. And so like that was just unsatisfying. But no, I mean, like I've made a few videos that have strong argumentative topics, but overall and I just feel like I'm even my information consumption habits are changing now that I'm starting to think a little bit less politically all of the time. Like I was
going to ask, like, why politics in terms of like the content that you do? Why not just exclusively do like media or art or culture review or something?
I think that's the direction I'm drifting in, right? Like I come from a political background, right? Like when I was a teenager, like that was what I wanted to be, I wanted to be an opinion journalist. Like I wanted to be a political commentator. Like that to me was the ideal. And then, luckily in the long lives that we lead, we can reinvent ourselves every so often. And I feel like I kind of maxed out on the political commentary and I found that it wasn't satisfying and it didn't feel useful. So now I'm trying to pivot into doing more cultural analysis and stuff like that. If I've often sort of fantasized, like if I was to write a book, people have sometimes said, like, you should write a book about like your politics, your manifesto, like make arguments about Canadian debates and this kind of thing. And I feel like, no, I'd like to write a book about like American culture and like things to appreciate in American culture. Like I feel, and cultural fluency and promote cultural literacy and all that. But because I sort of come from a political background and I can never completely sort of discard that, like I will always be interested in politics. I will always sort of think about things in a political way. I will always, have a sort of mindset that emphasizes the importance of politics as a sort of component part of a broader culture. As long as that sort of aspect of me is visible, there will always be people who are demanding more political content from me. But yeah, I definitely, like, if I could just stop talking about politics, I probably would. I don't know.
I think having J-Reg as your friend for a while will do that to you, so I'm sympathetic to that. I'm just kidding. Okay, well, hold on. Let me delete the whole next 30 questions I had about that.
No, it's fine.
No, I'm just fucking with you.
Yeah. It's hard not to care about politics, though. Like you can't, and I do think the stakes are legitimately high. Like I think particularly in America, like I do think that this election between Trump and Biden is very important, and I want people to not vote for Trump, right? Like that matters a great deal to me. So in some ways, like I'm sensitive to the argument, and I think certainly, I guess people on the far left make this, or people on the left in general make this, and people I assume on the right as well, is that, it is a luxury to sort of be apolitical, or to sort of not even to be apolitical, but to just kind of pull yourself out of the political conversation somewhat.
I get very upset when people say things like, regardless of if you like Trump or Biden, usually it's going to be people on the left will say things like, well, I'm not voting for Biden because I don't want to vote for the lesser of two evils or whatever. Yeah. And invariably, it's a middle-class white person, lives in a nice community or whatever. It's like, it's nice that for you, there's no difference between these two people because you care about the most top-level abstracted positions. Yes. But for other people who might want like the child tax credit back, or for people, it is a monumental difference between both candidates. Yeah.
And that's a very important point, and I think that's something to keep in mind. I talked about this in one of my videos. I was quoting an article, I think it was in The Atlantic maybe, or something about the so-called rise of political hobbyism, right? Some guy wrote a book about this, and it's the idea, that there are a lot of like middle class, upper middle class, white folks especially, who do treat politics as a type of entertainment, as a virtue signal, as a sort of source of emotional validation or good feelings or whatever. And it can be tempting to sort of think that that's the only way that people engage with politics. But no, there are people that engage with politics because they have specific tangible wants, and that the election or unelection of certain candidates or politicians will make a material difference for themselves. But, I feel like in America's case, in the case of this presidential election, I feel like the stakes are quite high when we're talking about the potential, survival of the constitutional order. Like that to me sort of strikes something as that all Americans should feel invested in.
Yeah. I agree. You had a job at the Washington Post for a while.
Yeah.
What was that like? How'd you get hired from there?
So, I mean, I've been doing opinion writing in various forums for, quite a while. And the Washington Post had an initiative, I think this was like back in 2015-ish, where they wanted to have voices from more international. They want to have more international voices in the opinion section talking about issues in that country from somebody who was in that country, which, seems self-evident, but is relatively less common in big sort of American news outlets to have someone doing Canadian political commentary from Canada, have someone doing, commentary on Indian politics who is based in India. There's lots of reporting that is done on these countries, but it's generally done by an American correspondent in that country. So it was kind of a novel ideal, global opinions. The kind of dark thing that I often tell people is that I was hired as part of an initiative that also included the hiring of Jamal Khashoggi, the Saudi guy who was going to do, Saudi commentary. And of course, he had his...
Yeah. He's in multiple pieces now. Yes.
Yeah. No, it's horrible. So I was brought on as part of that. And I wrote columns about Canadian politics from a Canadian perspective. A lot of people resented me having that job in Canada because they were like, why does JJ McCullough of all people? Because I have a reputation for being like, I don't know, contrarian or idiosyncratic and, in terms of my view on Canada and all of that kind of stuff. But then, there were editorial changes and they ultimately, I guess, decided that maybe this experiment didn't work and that, the Washington Post's value as a paper is as a great American paper with American employees offering commentary on American politics, right? So yeah, I sort of left the paper a couple of months ago, and it's fine. I focus on my videos, and again, but saying what I said before, right? Like even then, I kind of felt like, was this really what I wanted to keep doing? Did I really want to keep writing opinion columns, which weren't feeling like my true self? Or, because when you're writing an opinion column, you do kind of have to have an opinion. You have to rile yourself up, and you write in a way that's more provocative and combative and that kind of thing. And I don't want to be known as a combative person. I don't want to be known as a divisive person, right?
Were they generally always like politically charged topics?
Yeah, they were politically charged topics. And and again, like, I have, like, in a Canadian political context, like, yeah, I do lean more conservative than to Trudeau's side. Like, I don't support Trudeau's bid for a fourth term. I think it would be good if we could get some new leadership in that country. And but like, I'm not nuts about it. Like, there are right-wing kind of like cranks in Canada the same way there are everywhere else. And it's like, I didn't really want to be part of that political tribe, right? But you see that when you try to write, even in a sort of mild way, it comes off as being more combative, just because, the form dictates the substance to some degree. And as well, like, you also see, like, if I write any article that involves Trudeau, if we can work Trudeau into the headline, to get up more clicks, and, that will impress my editors more and this sort of thing, right? So the incentive structures were not great. But, at the same time, saying this out loud, I also realized that, then if you're complaining that there's too much kind of crappy political commentary, like, whose fault is that? Is that the fault because, more sort of sensible people are kind of abandoning this field to the cranks, So it's a fair criticism, I guess.
Yeah, actually, I was going to ask you that earlier, that if you feel like you've got a good mind for it, and if you feel like you're leading people to higher levels of political fluency and to be a little bit more positive on things, is it not depriving the arena of something worthwhile for you to be like, fuck this, I'm going to leave? Because if enough people that are of your mindset do that, then you've ceded the territory to all of the crazy people. I
guess something that I've been trying to do on my YouTube channel is I try to do just objective summaries of political topics sometimes, not like rants or sort of diatribes. But so, like, for example, I do every so often I make a video that's just kind of like summing up the political climate in Canada as it exists in that current moment. And I say, like, well, Trudeau is doing this, and then the Conservatives say that this is bad. And, I acknowledge the controversies. And I think that when you come from a more kind of like opinionated background, as I do, I think in some ways you can actually, if you allow yourself, you can be better at being objective, because you're more aware of like where the fault lines are. And what kind of like lines or language trigger people, and how the two sides genuinely perceive each other, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So depending on who I'm talking to, there are certain words where I know that like I can get you to agree with everything I'm saying about like this guy exhibits these really bad character qualities. We all agree they're bad, but if I accidentally say the phrase toxic masculinity, I've completely turned you off from anything I'm going to talk about. Yeah.
No, exactly right. So in that sense, like having that degree of literacy, which I do think, the more people that have a more sort of partisan history or more ideological history are better at it. Like, I do think that like a lot of like left-wing people or right-wing people, they can probably fake the other side better than they would want to admit. Just because they've spent so much time consuming that which they hate, they probably have gained a pretty high degree of fluency in how the other side works and operates, even if they don't want to admit it.
Hopefully. I would hope that's the case. I don't think I agree with you.
No, you don't?
Because I feel like what they consume are caricatures of the other side.
That's probably true.
Yeah. I used to think that was just like the people on the ground, but I'm not as sure for the people at the top anymore. It's hard to say.
It's true. I mean, I think that like someone like Ben Shapiro, I think he could probably, if he allowed himself to, right? Like if someone like Ben Shapiro allowed himself to like write a kind of Turing test style, like op-ed from a progressive perspective, not if he was doing it as a parody, not if he was doing it to like, show his right-wing base what left-wingers really want. Like if he was just doing it as an intellectual exercise, I think he probably could do it.
I think so, but you're not to dick ride anybody, but I think Ben Shapiro is probably one of the best or most intelligent right wing, as much as I might disagree with him.
Like could Candace Owens do that?
I don't think so. Absolutely not. I would love to see Candace Owens, Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles. Like, can you just write out why you think somebody left might support like DEI? And they would be a comical caricature of trying to figure out. Yes. Although to some extent, like I mean, as much as I like to say I communicate with different people, I can fall into the same trap sometimes. Peter Boghossian and I don't know if you can tell, but I used to be ultra sunburned like yesterday and the day before. We went outside and we did like a street quiz thing on people. And one of the things that me and another guy, very ardent Trump supporter, the question that was asked was, do you think that Biden would be a good president next term? Like, why or why not, basically? Yes. Or like, do you think he would be a really good president next term? Or would Trump be better or something? It was something like that. And I was on the strongly agree, and he was on the strongly disagree. And the first question Peter asked was, okay, write down why you think the other side thinks what they do. And we both take a second and we do it. And the other guy wrote down, because you think Biden has like a lot of good policies or passed a lot of good legislation, whatever. And I was like, yeah, that is mine. And I got 3 guesses. And my first was like, because you think that Trump would do, I think it was like a really good job at the border. Yeah. And he was like, no. And I was like, because you think Trump is defending like Americans at home when it comes to like policies or taxes. Yeah. He's like, no. And I was like, and it's one other thing. And I was just completely wrong. And the guy showed me his board and it was because he thinks Biden is senile. And I'm like, fuck me. Like I'm living in like a policy world, like trying to guess like, well, what bill was it? What executive order was it? Yes. And and this guy's like, no, Biden is senile. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, fuck. Jesus. The
policy is really fallen by the wayside, It's like, I think of it that even like, I feel like now actually, hopefully this doesn't date the podcast too much when I say it, but it's like, like now there's this whole conversation about like the abortion thing, right? And like Trump gave that speech the other day where he's sort of trying to like moderate his position on that and this kind of thing. And I've heard some like very serious people saying, well, like Mike Pence denounced this and like, is this going to like risk his support with the evangelicals and this kind of thing? Because there used to be this idea that like abortion was like the one policy thing that you couldn't deviate from. Like you had to be 100% pro-life to be a Republican in good standing. But even now, I'm starting to wonder, like, if Trump could, in theory, come out tomorrow and say, like, pro-choice, like, that's where it's at. And would he lose any support? I don't know. Maybe not. Like, I think that the policies have become so irrelevant in this culture of hyperpolarization, and particularly on the Republican side, like, just the deep personal fidelity to Trump above everything else. Yeah.
Yeah, people think these Overton windows are these like set things and it's like where you exist in, when in reality they're not only are they incredibly fluid, but more importantly, they're unknown. Nobody really knows where they are. So a politician could discover that there's actually way more room here than we previously thought, which I think Trump did accidentally. I don't give him credit for anything. Trump, I think, accidentally discovered or ended up in an area. It's like, oh, shit, I can shit on prisoners of war and I don't have to support American foreign policy and all this shit or whatever. And I'll be like, yeah, we actually go for this. And it's not like the Overton window is necessarily moving, although in a way you phrase it, yeah, that is kind of happening. But it's just that there are a lot of positions that people could stake out that we don't even know the American public has an appetite for yet, because things can change on the ground very, very, very quickly, depending on the conditions that exist in the country. For going through Israeli-Palestinian history, one of the mistakes I made like 3 or 4 months ago, I was like, well, look at the polling. This is what these people want. Yes. But then historically, when huge peace deals are signed or like huge conflicts happen or whatever, opinion on the ground can shift incredibly quickly, such that if I would have said like, oh, well, on June 1st, 1967, this is what everybody thought before the 6-Day War or whatever. And I say, there's no way that this would happen. There's no way that these two countries would agree on peace. There's no way. And then you go 10 days later, it's like, damn, everybody's opinion has changed dramatically based on what's happened. That, yeah, there's always a lot of movement, or more movement, I think, than people realize sometimes. Yeah.
I guess it depends, though. The one thing that I would sort of say to qualify that is like, it depends, again, like whether or not the policy positions matter at all, or whether or not, like, because like there was this conventional understanding with Trump, which was sort of like what you said, which is that like Trump has kind of like upended the Republican consensus on certain issues, and that he's revealed a sort of like suppressed desire on the part of Republican voters for, you know, an alternative policy position. And, you know, I think that that was a good theory of the case, but I also like just wonder to the degree that it's just Trump, like it's just personal loyalty to him. He tells it like it is, like there's a deep sort of personal affinity for Trump and a deep trust in Trump, where it's just like what Trump is saying is determined to be the right position. Not that Trump is like brave and has embraced like clever new policy positions that are helping the Republican Party grow. It's just that like Trump is Trump, and Trump is helping the Republican Party grow, and that there is no policy position in one direction or another that he could take that would either expand or limit his appeal, because it's just a man.
It's like, does God command things that are good, or are they good because God commands them?
Yes, precisely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's my guess after Trump is there's probably a lot of things that just kind of run concurrently with each other, and we assumed the causality on one when in reality it's just correlated with another thing that's highly causal. Yeah. So it might be the case that for a long time people have had these political dispositions, and we've thought the policy positions were what mattered.
Yes.
But in reality, yeah, they're just proxies for some other thing. And if you change the position, as long as that other thing is unchanged, nobody actually cares.
This is exactly something that I feel like I am trying to reckon with a lot as somebody that has traditionally identified as conservative. And I think this is actually the case with like a lot of sort of never Trump conservative types. Do you consume the Bulwark at all?
I don't. I'm familiar with never Trump Republicans, but
the Bulwark is like their main publication. It's really good.
Okay.
You might like some of their content.
Are they the ones that started the the Lincoln Project?
They're like, I think like sort of loosely associated with it. Their big thing was I forget what it's called now. I think it's like called Former Republicans Against Trump.
Okay.
And they make ads that are quite persuasive, I think, because they interview people that have voted for Trump in the past and talk about why they don't like him, or people that were Republicans and don't like him and all that. But one of their big positions that they sort of engage with a lot is the question of whether or not conservatism and like this big robust conservative movement of William F. Buckley and Goldwater and Ronald Reagan and, you know, this whole sort of canon that appeals to a certain crowd, a certain crowd of like intellectuals and pundits, the National Review types and all that, where I used to work. The question is sort of like whether or not that stuff, these policy and philosophical positions, were ever what made conservatism attractive, right? Or whatever made the Republican Party attractive, or whether or not there just is a kind of like somewhat reactionary faction of American politics or American society that just wants to vote for the party that's like the party that's against the left broadly understood, or the progressive side broadly understood. And they don't really have a clear sense of what they want from Washington or what they want from the Republican Party. They just kind of like want a strong party that will crush the bad element of American society. And
how do you even, I feel like measuring that would be so hard, because you can't take anybody at their word because people don't genuinely know, right?
But I think that in that sense, sort of like, and what the sort of some of these Bulwark people would say is that Trump was kind of the test. Like, if you put somebody who's just like as unappealing and sort of dopey as Trump up on the ballot, but if his only political skill is like rhetoric against the other side, like, is that enough for the Republican base? Is that enough for the Republican electorate? And it seems like it was, which then makes you second guess, like, well, why did we have all these eggheads and all these people like making their serious, like, why did we have Paul Ryan? Like, why did the Republican culture produce Paul Ryan when it could have just produced Donald Trump, and maybe that would have got, you know, beat Obama in, you know?
But then it's also hard to tell that, like, because a thing could have happened for one reason, and then as time goes on, it morphs into something else, but you don't even realize it. Like, maybe at one point in time, these values were incredibly important, but these values attract a certain type of people, but then these type of people don't actually care about the values, but they kind of remain just because. And then at some point, if something changes, everybody's like, well, hold on. I don't know if they actually did this experiment, but have you heard of the one with like 5 monkeys in a room and there's like an electric shock if there's a banana at the top of a ladder?
No.
The idea is there's some similar-ish experiments you can run that seem to work, but 5 monkeys in a room, one of them tries to go for the banana and the floor shocks all the monkeys if you try to grab the banana, so they pull them down. You swap one monkey out, you add another in, the new one will run for the banana, but as soon as he does, everybody pulls him down before the shock even happens. A second monkey is thrown in until eventually you've replaced every monkey. You can turn off the electric shocks, but the learned behavior behavior is still there, such that when a new monkey comes out, even though there's 4 in there that have never felt the negative stimulus before, as soon as the new monkey goes for the thing, they pull them down because that's just what they've learned to do.
Yeah.
I think on YouTube I've seen where people will do these experiments where if you go into an office to wait and there's a whole bunch of like plants the standing up and the sitting down, people will do it, and they'll teach that behavior even when everyone else has moved out of the room to new people that come in. So then you wonder that like maybe things existed for a reason at one point in time, but now they don't, but the convention is there and people stuck with it, and then people find out, well, actually this convention doesn't matter anymore. So then the question is like, well, now you're in a totally new battlefield where who knows what's okay or what's not okay. And we've been saying this in American politics since Trump won the first election. What's the field going to look like going forward? Has everything changed irrevocably? But I mean, it seems like it hasn't, because we haven't produced a whole bunch of Trump-like candidates. We got Vivek, who sort of was.
I think we have. I think
you think so?
I think that when you look at the sort of people, and again, my buddies at the Bulwark, this is how asking for like a good source. I feel like a lot of my political awareness is now coming from this one site, but they do a really good job of documenting just how many MAGA freaks are getting elected all over the place. Like the sort of people that are winning nominations to be, senator, governor, state legislator, state senate, county
Marjorie
commissioner.
Taylor Greene and stuff. Yeah.
It's like, it's not just Marjorie Taylor Greene. Like you can go down the list, and what you will often find is that if the choice in a Republican primary at any level is between like a complete MAGA space lasers wacko and then like some, guy who's been a loyal servant of the Republican Party and worked his way through the state legislature, and then I was state attorney general, and and if they're both like running in a primary for governor, like the Republican base will vote for the crackpot before they'll vote for the sort of the standard Republican.
I guess the question is are these like spiritually down ballot votes for Trump? Like if Trump disappears, is there still going to be the fervor for these types of people?
I think so, because I think that like sort of like Trump has allowed a normalization of a lot of like crankish right-wing views and conspiracy theories and rhetoric and style. Like that has now been normalized. And I think a lot of Republicans have realized, or a lot of Republican voters have realized, it's like, oh, we can have that. Like, that's okay. Like, we can vote for that. That's a choice. And it seems like a lot of Republicans will gladly take that choice if it's offered to them. They're not going for an argument that appeals to anything else. They're not going for arguments that appeal to experience or competence or any sort of policy agenda. They're going for politicians that resemble Trump and make them feel the way that Trump makes them feel. And I think that the idea of like a politician making you feel a certain way is a very underrated aspect of political appeal in general.
I definitely agree with that. That's why people spoke favorably of like Clinton and Biden, and very disfavorably of Mrs. Clinton.
Yes.
Although I am curious, I'm not fully sold on that. I guess we'll see when Trump is gone forever from politics, whether he wins or loses the next election cycle.
But like, what would the alternative be though? Who would be elected if not mini Trumps?
I feel like the cycle of populism is somebody promises you the world, and they have really enticing rhetoric. And actually, I am kind of mad right now, and this guy channels that anger. But then once they get into office, they kind of have this. It's like entering adulthood period that everybody has. The crypto guys did it when they discovered, well, maybe central banking exists for a reason, or computer engineers did it when they were like, oh, maybe all these traditional engineering practices should apply to coding as well. Everybody has this moment where like, okay, all of the institutions and all of the things that existed before were here for good reason. Trump came into office and he was still funny. He still had good tweets. And he still was like, entertaining to watch on camera. But man, he was a horrendously ineffective leader. Yeah. And I feel like populism runs its course when you've had your guy come in and he's like, okay, well, actually, I don't know how anything works. I can't get anything done. And my good words will only carry it so far until people are like, okay, well, we're kind of done with this. And then you move on to the next thing, which is usually back to kind of the status quo. But I could be totally wrong on that. I hope I'm not, because holy the Conservative Party in the U.S. is insane right now.
Well, I mean, I guess, like what makes it really nefarious is that they do not have a mindset that can acknowledge the reality of their own defeat, right? Like that was in some ways the most sinister thing that Trump did, was that in a normal, healthy democracy, when you lose, there has to be some degree of reckoning. There was the famous Republican autopsy when Mitt Romney lost, right? But like Trump has created this sort of world in which the Republicans never lose, right? There's only conspiracies that prevent them. And that somehow the true American majority is always craving Republican rule, right? So that's that mindset, that attitude. Carrie Lake has this attitude in Arizona as well, still refuses to concede that she lost that gubernatorial election, right? And when that becomes normalized, then you have like basically prevented like you've inoculated yourself against the possibility that there can ever be a moment to catch your breath and reckon and reflect on what's gone wrong.
Because they've already talked about how the next election is going to be rigged.
Yes.
Like this conversation, they've already prepared that. It's funny because you mentioned with YouTubers or with debates that it kind of sucks that there's no central authority to say he won that debate, and we've judged that effectively.
Yes.
It feels like we've lost that ability to even have those discussions about our factual reality anymore.
Oh, absolutely.
That I think a super majority, I think it was like 70% of Republicans still believe the last election was stolen. And it's like, we can disagree on some things. Is climate change real or not? Sure. But when we're disagreeing on fundamental, essential aspects of our democracy, that's really scary. Because from that foundation, if you disagree on facts enough, it can justify a whole bunch of really crazy stuff, like Gen 6 or Gen 6 or worse or whatever, depending on, which is scary,